It's Sunday, December 22nd, 2024. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5 Minute News. Our guest today is a mum, a podcaster, political commentator, better known as Jojo from Jers on social media. Jo Carducci, welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It's good to see you again.
It's great to see you too. Firstly, we should start with some congratulations because I know that you were invited to the White House, to the Christmas party. I saw some pictures of it because our team from Midas Touch were there. It looked absolutely beautiful, and it was a kind of fitting tribute to the last chapter of Joe Biden's presidency, wouldn't you say?
It was beautiful. It was definitely bittersweet. That day was surreal for a lot of reasons. The party was one of them. But in the morning, Brett and I had the privilege and honor of being asked to join the communications team for the administration and eventually the president himself for a briefing with about, I guess there were about 10 of us total, maybe, which was one of the craziest things I've ever done in my life. And we got to visit the Oval Office as well.
Wow. So an invitation to the White House, I guess, for somebody like yourself who is an activist and somebody who cares deeply about the country and undoubtedly about the state of politics right now, just from your amazing rants and ravings on social media and your Substack, everything, I read it all. I get the feeling that it's certainly an important reminder that the work that you're doing, that we're all doing as independent journalists and activists, is being heard. Would you agree with that?
100%. You don't do this because you want any recognition of any kind, right? You do this because you believe in what you're advocating for, and you believe in the furtherance of American democracy. And we have children, and so we believe in protecting and preserving that for them and all future generations. But that first and foremost is absolutely the truth. And I would do it without any acknowledgement from any administration or elected official out there. But that said, sitting across from the communications director as he's telling you that they have seen you and been watching you and what you've done and what you continue to do for American democracy, and then having the president himself look at your faces directly and tell you that he sees what you're doing as well, and that he's expecting that we will be kind of carrying the torch forward, knowing that he won't be in the White House anymore, but that the fight doesn't end. And that, he mentioned something they all did actually, which was profoundly impactful for me, which was that we've been sort of out there doing this independently for a while now, right? Again, in furtherance of what we truly believe in, without ever being necessarily seen, but by, or thinking we were. But that what they identified for us was that we were way ahead of the curve. We were way ahead of them. We were way ahead of a lot of the, powers that be in the party itself, way ahead of the country in many ways. But if you ask me, we were lockstep with the country in that way. We were just sort of listening to what people were telling us they wanted and where they wanted to receive their information and who they trusted and why. But to hear them say that, certainly, it was very legitimizing and reinforcing, and it made me want to work even harder. But that idea that we can be sort of, the next wave of fighters, that to me made me really just want to work much harder and fight much harder. And it gave me a sense of being seen and acknowledged. And that's great. I mean, who doesn't want that?
For sure. It is a pivot, isn't it, for the White House to acknowledge that the mainstream and corporate media has dropped the ball to the extent that actually I think maybe the Harris campaign regretted not engaging more with independent media producers. And that was certainly criticism that was circulating because Donald Trump was going on all of these weird podcasts. And ultimately, that's where people are getting their news these days.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to a larger systemic problem, which is, the Republicans have been building this infrastructure for quite a long time. And the Democrats, we play catch up on a lot of things, right? But when we get there, hopefully we fly past them. It's just we have to always play catch up, which is very frustrating. But yeah, I mean, Donald Trump for all of the criticisms of Donald Trump and Team Trump, et cetera, and that whole ecosystem, one thing that he's able to convince people is true is that he is really where they are, right? That he is communicating in the way they want people to communicate with them. They don't want to have to like get out a thesaurus to break down what somebody is telling them. They certainly don't want somebody to tell them what they're feeling when they're not feeling it. And then to have that filtered through mainstream media, legacy media, which they already don't trust, you just have the recipe for disengagement and people who are just not going to, believe what you have to say. And so they're going to tune you out. And I do agree that, and I wouldn't say it's Kamala or Biden actually in particular, because, this is kind of the wild, wild west for a lot of people who are campaigning, or it used to be a debate performance would be, this huge swing, but now it's, did they go on the right podcasts? And the candidates themselves have to trust that their communications teams and the people who are expert in this know where they should be and know who they should be talking to and know what the American people want to hear, how they want to hear it, from whom and when. It is really a change. I will say, of ironically of all, the oldest president, right, and Joe Biden has been the most aggressive in terms of embracing this at all. I mean, Ben Meiselas he's talked to him a few times. He talked to him recently, and Ben is in digital media. I mean, Ben is not legacy media. He didn't come up through, MSNBC. And Biden has definitely embraced that more than his predecessors have, which is a good indication for the future. But I will say that we had, some breakdowns where I think going these big events, the rallies were great, but going on some of those smaller podcasts and talking to the American people where they want to receive the information in the format they want to receive it in, not doing that definitely was detrimental to clearly to our success, and something I believe we need to build more infrastructure and more scaffolding towards making sure that we can bridge that gap in the future.
Despite the election loss, it wasn't wholly unsuccessful for Democrats, considering that they were running a new candidate effectively with just 100 days. And obviously there's been a lot of, post-show analysis and people trying to say, where did we go wrong and all that. I've kind of come up with a simple analogy for it, and that maybe the Harris campaign was a little too holistic in its messaging. And Donald Trump obviously doesn't operate in that space, I often think about people that have been to therapy and people who haven't been to therapy. Mm-hmm. And I refer to the people that speak the language of therapy, who are prepared to talk a little deeper about how they feel and are better at communicating because they've had to do it, practiced it with a therapist. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I saw it. It's almost like the Trump voters had never been to therapy and the Harris supporters had been and spoke that holistic language. Do you think there's any truth to that?
I mean, it's an interesting analogy, one I had never considered because I am somebody who who goes to therapy, right? So, and I don't know that. I guess I do speak that language because I often think of things in terms of doing the work, doing the hard work, and I really do believe that that you have to give yourself grace. I do say those things, and you have to walk through adversity, and you have to walk through challenge, and you have to unpack things, and you have to, get to the heart of what's really behind all of your responses and reactions and feelings, all of that. So I am a person who advocates therapy, and I am someone who has benefited from therapy. But I guess in terms of that being, a defining distinction between the two, you mean the voters, not the candidates themselves, in terms of. Yeah, so like the whole joy thing and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and just understanding, I mean, we are better together than we are apart, or we have more in common, and just speaking in a language that requires a level of critical thinking as opposed to just lock her up, build the wall, a simple language.
Yeah, and to your point, I think there is something to what you're saying. And again, remember what Donald Trump does in avoiding sort of that holistic stuff and what he is so fond of doing, what is so successful, is he traffics in fear and division and hate. And those things are inherently more attractive in the strangest ways, right? to people to consume and then to amplify themselves or to embody. Fear is an incredibly powerful communicator, and when you're saying to people who have irrational fears, maybe of something, whatever it is about dogs and cats, etc., and you're saying to them, not only do I see that and it's not irrational, but I'm going to fix it, which is a nebulous it, because it's not a thing that exists, but now you've told them, oh yeah, this thing that I'm afraid of, that people tell me I'm wrong to be afraid of, you're not only seeing it as reality, but you're going to be my savior. So that other person is talking about brat summer. I don't even understand what that means. They're talking about, what, not going back to what I don't remember because I have some kind of weird disconnect from reality as it pertains to the trauma that I endured under his administration, which is a real thing. Yeah. But I will say that what I thought was effective, what she did, that could have been more effective in a lot of different iterations, is when she said, we're not going back. The only problem with we're not going back, because we're not going back could mean a lot of things. But when you're in the current administration, and it sounds like you're saying we're not going back to the current administration, you confuse a lot of people who then try and press you on what you would do differently from the current administration, and then you don't have an answer to that, which I believe could have been navigated in a million trillion ways without stepping on his toes. I mean, she could have said, here are a few tweaks I would have made to policy A, B, C, but by and large, we were massively successful, which is true. But I think the idea of we're not going back and then tying it to, look, I get it. We don't want to remember a lot of the things that we went through. It's easier to put that somewhere else. And maybe this is a little bit holistic talk, right? But like, I see you in what's happening to you right now, instead of you need me to convince you of what I'm telling you see right now. Do you know what I mean? So I think maybe that was among them. And yes, appealing to the simplest, most basic, like, human traits that he is successful at, again, because he traffics so much in fear and hate, is a better pathway. But we as Democrats, we have to figure out more effective ways to do that, because what we have on our side and in our favor is the truth, decency, humanity, and democracy. And those are things that, by and large, people actually in this country really want. When you take the candidate away, you put those issues on the ballot, they overwhelmingly support them. So we have to figure out how to message that better.
I suppose the other thing is that Trump can't run again, although he a way around that, cares nothing for the Constitution. He's also 78, so there's that. Mm-hmm. But without Trump, I don't think the opposition to the Democrats is actually that great, because and this is maybe what Democrats fail to understand, is that it was really never about anything other than Trump supporting that man, and really, this kind of worship of an individual, and at the same time owning the libs at whatever cost, even cost to themselves. I referred to it as turkeys voting for Thanksgiving. And so what I fear that is something, again, that Democrats may have missed, is that it wasn't really about policies or detail. Yes, it was about hatred, immigration, and women and all that stuff. But mainly it was just about getting behind this guy who gave them license to be terrible and say terrible things because he did too. Oh, yeah. And so it's very cultural, isn't it? It's actually not really about politics, which is about making the world a better place. Right. It's more, that was a much more of a tribal movement that we didn't really have in on the left.
No, you're 100% right, and I don't think Democrats ever really fully unpacked that reality, myself included. Because we look at him and we think I don't understand. I don't understand. Right. First of all, like just looking at him, I call him the upside down Oompa Loompa, the melted circus peanut, the melon hued moron, whatever nicknames you want to apply, which I have plenty. You just look at him and on the surface, people with still firing synapses like you and I say, I don't see the appeal just in the aesthetic. But then you add to that he is incurious, unintelligent, unlikable largely, that he doesn't
illiterate.
Yeah, illiterate. Yeah, he has no real humor. There's no humanity there. He's not a good person. He's a terrible person. He's a misogynist. He's a racist. He's a bigot. He's a xenophobe. I mean, all of those things, right? It's a lot. There's a lot to be like, I don't get it. But also, I mean, you add into January 6th, you add in the New York hush money, election interference trial, you add in 11,780 votes Georgia call.
But that list is exactly why they like him. And that's what Democrats didn't understand, right?
Yeah, agreed. I'll get to why I think right. So top lines, I'll get to why I think that was actually harmful to us, but I don't think we should have actually done anything different except maybe started all of these things sooner, which I can argue too. Yeah. But I underestimated that he had appeal for, I never thought he could expand his base. I underestimated that he could have appeal for new voters or for young people or for people who were just tired, because this is a big thing, Anthony, right? People are just tired of all of it. And so he does still seem like the anti-politician, right? He's a plain talker. He says the things no one wants people to say out loud. Like, he doesn't care. And all of that is obviously not true, because he has no filter and he's a horrible person. So, but it explains why they voted for AOC and Donald Trump. Same ticket, right? Because they want people who talk to them in ways that they understand and don't talk down to them, even though he actually disdains them. But my son, 15, was watching TikTok and he said, Mom, I know what's up with Donald Trump because you talk about it all the time and my eyes are wide open. But I'm telling you that if I didn't have you as my mom and I didn't have you constantly talking about this all the time, I would be looking at TikTok and thinking, that guy's kind of cool. Like, that guy's like a guy. He's like a dude.
Like bad grandpa or bad Santa or something.
Right? He's hanging out with, WWE people, whatever they're called, the mixed martial arts. And he's hanging out with, cool podcasters and Joe Rogan. Right. And so that populist thing, he did expand his base. But then, he also got the people who were just sick and tired. And then he also got the racists, the bigots, and the people who just couldn't vote for a black woman. But I think you're right. If you take him out, the last part was about the cases, the criminal cases. Mm-hmm. This is an authoritarian page, right? A page of an authoritarian playbook. You have to make yourself look put upon, that you have to make yourself look like a victim. You have to make yourself look like the system is coming for you and you represent us, you represent the people, and that the system can do this. And I laughed at that. Yeah. I used to make videos all the time saying, no, Donald Trump is not being indicted for you. He didn't do any of these things for you. He did all these things violating the Constitution, violating his oath of office for him. And I would say that, and I would mean it, and it would go to exactly the same people all of my stuff went to, and nobody beyond that. And that's a failing on my end, I'll admit. But yeah, I think if you take him out of the mix, what you're left with is a bunch of spineless lackeys who don't have any of that, sadly, charisma. But it's also probably because they're not quite as shameless as he is. And he's also cut his teeth on being a facade, on being created of manufactured. I call it fictional Trump. The Apprentice. Yeah, it's a brand, but The Apprentice, right? He was never any of those things you saw in The Apprentice. And if you know Noel Castler, he was there on the set, and he's like, none of this was remotely true. Yeah. But
he's the marketing guy, right? Who worked with Mark.
He was a booker. But,
he was the booker, right? And they basically came out and said that Trump's office wasn't up to standard, so we had to build him an office.
Yeah, right.
And he didn't have a helicopter, and they created this image, and now with hindsight, I think that chap was saying that he has great regret for all of that.
Yeah. I mean, and who could have forecasted this moment, right? Like, who could have looked at that and said, oh, he's very entertaining, but nobody takes him seriously. And here in the New York, New Jersey area, we know exactly kind of the charlatan we're dealing with here. This is the person who was calling the New York rags as pretending to be his own publicist by changing his voice just a little bit and giving himself different names. They were aliases.
John Barron or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. David Dennison, too. They had two, I think at least two aliases. But the American people didn't, they didn't see any of that as fraudulent. So when you sort of set the table with that, of course, this person who doesn't go to church but golfs at, Our Lady of the Perpetual Mulligan every Sunday is devout. Like, of course, this person who's thrice married, serial philanderer, of course, he's a family man. Like, I mean, of course, this person is a patriot, despite the fact that he, incited an insurrection against our capital in order to, stop the certification of an election he lost. I mean, it's fictional Trump is so easy to sort of maintain. First of all, it confirms a lot of the things that they don't want, that they want to believe, but also because it's everything he's always been built upon. He's orange. He's an orange, yellowish orange person because he thinks that looks like vitality, that he wears lifts in his shoes and lies about his height and weight because he thinks that projects strength, and it's all a lie. But people see what they want to see as long as they're getting the affirmations to what you said before. For a lot of people, what it does is it allows them to lean into what they used to feel terribly guilty about even thinking. And now they can just say whatever they want to say, however horrible, racist, bigoted, sexist, threatening it is. And that's really, really powerful and hard to put back in the toothpaste tube, you know?
This stuff is happening all around the world.
Oh, yeah.
It's not exclusive to the US, although I do believe that Trump's first presidency kind of lit the touch paper for these despots and these egomaniacs to take hold and to get elected, because they suddenly have the confidence to break with all convention. And because Trump cares nothing for the law or protocol or any of that stuff, because the United States is held up as you know, the great democracy, and people look to replicate it, they saw an anarchist, and so anarchy was acceptable to Jair Bolsonaro, for example, in Brazil. Now he's been prevented. I mean, they actually did something about him, right? They actually stopped him from being a politician ever again. Not something that happened here. And so that really is my fear, is that how the rest of the world now is following suit and thinking, well, if it's good enough for America, it's good enough for us.
Oh, I think about that all the time. And I think that you are right in many ways. You know, we are sort of the standard bearer for democracy, for surviving, thriving democracy. And it was different in 2016, where he kind of looked like an outlier to the rest of the world, that the rest of the world couldn't wait to get rid of him and thought maybe we temporarily lost our minds. And it looked that way in 2020 when he lost. And then I'm sure inexplicably they were looking at us going, well, how the heck is he back? And now he's really, really back. And you're watching world leaders like Trudeau and Macron kind of kissing the ring now, which is also different from 2016, where I think they were a little more cautious about their, I wouldn't call it sycophancy, but like yielding. You know, there was still. They thought
he was a temporary measure, didn't they?
Yeah.
They didn't see him as ever returning, that it was an accident. And all countries accidentally choose the wrong guy. But, you know, all the time. Yeah. He is back.
Right. And because this already was underway globally, right, that you can unpack. People much smarter than me will tell you, and you've probably explored this as well, the millions and trillions of reasons why the whole world is shifting towards this more nativistic approach, further and further right. You could talk about the pandemic, you can talk about AI, you can talk about the internet and the access to other people, and social media's influence on making the world smaller unnaturally, on never being able to escape all of it. I'm sure, again, that people have already plenty of theories for why this is happening, much smarter than me. It is happening nonetheless. And the world leaders who are sort of still on that, the tipping point, like the Macrons and the Trudeaus, who have lower approval ratings than Joe Biden does right now, which is also strange, but true. The highest, I think, is the Italian prime minister. It's a prime minister in Italy, right? And she's also far right. Is a she, right, in Italy?
Yeah.
Yes. I think so. I think so. If it's not, I think it is. But the whole world is moving in that direction. And then Donald Trump comes along, and they're already kind of teetering. And then he's like, yes, of course this can happen in America, when the rest of America is like, how did this happen in America? How did this happen in America? And it is the sort of thing that emboldens a lot of people who do not want to follow the rules that democracy sets forth. And They want very much to enrich themselves. They want very much to have a concentration of power. And that's very much where we are headed as a world, because we're also looking at, don't forget, Donald Trump is, well, I'll put this nicely, I think of him as a tinkle tape trader, because he is I think he's Putin's puppet. I think also Elon Musk is in Putin's pocket. And Putin very much wants nothing more than for us to exit NATO so that he can march across Europe. And with Germany in the hands of a far-right leader who will align with him as well, or at least roll over, we have a problem on our hands in that region of the world, but also we have a problem on our hands in the Middle East because Benjamin Netanyahu is of the same ilk, and Benjamin Netanyahu wants to steamroll over Gaza, and Donald Trump will 1,000% let him do that too. So you put one person in this pivotal position of power, and don't even get me started on Orban and Erdogan, but you put one person in this pivotal position of power, and you can see how many different countries around the world the ripple effect will impact, and it'll feel like a tsunami. So to say that we are in an extraordinary time that we need to brace for, fight through, and I believe emerge from stronger is the understatement of the century.
It's interesting when we talk about the Second World War and people struggle to understand how Hitler converted Germans into kind of extremist Nazis. Mm-hmm. It seemed so impossible to understand. Yeah. Despite what we read. And yet here we are now seeing this kind of transmogrification of individuals who were quite able to engage in traditional civil discourse, right, who have literally become brainwashed into hatred. Mm-hmm. And whether it be immigrants or whether it be trans people, it's become this. The whole rhetoric now is it's so polarizing, and the Democrats have a job, don't they, to try and knit that stuff back together. I thought we'd gone as low as we could, but I fear now that maybe we have just dropped down to the lower ground level.
Oh, I think
basement.
Yeah, I think we're down there. I mean,
parking lot.
Yeah, we're when I was a kid, I used to think you could dig to China, right? Like so if that was true, we'd be approaching somehow. Yeah. We'd get to almost the deepest point. I thought we had gone as far down as we could possibly get as well. And now we have, the de facto leader of the Republican Party in a billionaire, foreign-born billionaire car company owner who is forcing an entire party to bend to his will via social media app in terms of shutting down our government at Christmas.
Yeah. You couldn't make that stuff up, really, could you?
Pretty much no. And if I don't know if you know that there's a Mad Libs thing. So there's, Mad Libs. Have you met Mad Libs yet or heard of Mad Libs or seen it? So here in America, we have, your kids I would recommend getting them. They're really fun. It's really fun to do with your kids. Okay. And they can do it with each other. So it's it's a little notebook and each page is different. And so you have like a story, so to speak, and they're all ridiculous. And there will be blanks. And in the blank, it'll say, ask your person you're playing with for a verb, an adverb, an adjective, and they will give you something random. They don't know the stories, right? So you're just say, okay, give me an adverb, give me an adjective, give me a noun, give me a proper noun. And they don't know the story yet. So they do, they can pick ridiculous things. And so when you're finished, you read the whole story and it's like, Joe was drinking a, ball of fire, that's their word. The point is that it's ridiculous and hysterical because you've created this story out of random words that make no sense, plugged into this where they were supposed to go. That's what this feels like. And that's what the sentence I just said about Elon Musk, it feels like we're living a page of Mad Libs.
Yes.
Yeah, but we are. But it's real at the same time.
Because the people that voted for Trump, you can forgive them, but they didn't vote for Elon Musk. No. And yet they seem to have got Elon Musk.
Right.
And that's really how something we weren't really expecting, because he didn't really seem that interested in government before. He was given this role of the Doge role of efficiency and stripping $2 trillion out of the budget. Right. The irony is not lost on me that billionaires are the ones who are seeking to take entitlements away and public services away from people who have nothing.
No, and the same people who said that they voted for Donald Trump because the price of eggs was too high. Like the irony is really, It is impossible to ignore. So they voted against their own access to health care. And many people with pre-existing conditions didn't know the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare, as it's been dubbed, were the same. Right.
Man.
So many. Yeah. But I want to get back to, what you were talking about as it pertained to the Holocaust, because I've talked about this a lot. I think we may have talked about the last time we spoke on a podcast, because when I was a young student learning for the first time about the Holocaust and reading, the Diary of Anne Frank, etc., the question I had on my mind was the question you just posed. And the question I kept asking of anybody who would listen to me was, why isn't anyone explaining to me how the good Germans would have looked the other way, or how the good Germans would have been able to execute people in mass graves, how they would have been able to kill children, to torture, people who were, non-binary or gay or with, disabilities. How could the good Germans have allowed any of that to happen? And every teacher I ever had was, that's a question for the ages. There was never an answer, because they had never lived it. They had never looked at it. They'd never seen it up close. So it was impossible to really fathom a rational answer. But you're right. We are looking at it right now. And if you read books by, say, Tim Snyder, where he talks about, on tyranny, for example, and he talks about what we can do to avoid falling prey to a tyrant, there's so many things. Do not obey in advance being one of them. But he talks about, police officers and members of the military, people who have access to weapons, and never forgetting the responsibility that you have when you have a weapon like that. Because in Germany, so many of those police officers who were just public servants were transitioned into killing machines without a lot of friction. And then the good Germans, again, were the good Germans, and in air quotes, like regular citizens, were able to sort of accept and all of this reality, even though it didn't jive with who they were as human beings, because it was normalized. And there's a through line throughout history related to the capacity that human beings have to commit atrocities against other human beings. It's just the way the world has always worked. Hopefully you have good stewards who are in leadership positions who don't embolden that. But that's not what we have. This has been underway for quite a long time before Donald Trump. But of course he came along and he lit the gasoline-soaked field ready for this sort of thing. So now not only is violence celebrated, it's encouraged, and it's normalized to the point where the whitewashing and sanewashing and revisionist history of January 6th, I promise you, we will see some sort of parade lifting up those people who beat our Capitol police officers with their own
and a
shield.
Christmas album, probably.
Right. Yeah. Right. Christmas album, the greatest hits, no pun intended, of the J6 choir, right? Like, and we had to be primed for that. Not you and I, we had to be primed to respond to it. But the Americans as a whole, society as a whole, this was underway for a really long time. And we were super susceptible to falling prey to what we were sort of inclined to want to sort of be anyway, which is, it's a tribal thing. It's a survival of the fittest thing. It is a terrifying thing, but it is where we are right now. And when you ask the question about how did that happen, during the Holocaust, and then you look at your adorable little neighbors with their adorable little family at a soccer game, cheering for their adorable little child. And then you realize they voted, because everyone in my town almost did, they voted for this wannabe dictator who encourages, emboldens violence and spews and stokes hate. And you're like, to them, that's nothing. To them, that's not disqualifying. In fact, he's a strong man. And then you realize they don't realize what that is, because they've never looked at it either. But they're keep being brought along further and further and further, so that things that we don't want to think about, things that transpired during atrocities like the Holocaust, can happen here.
It's very sad that, he didn't invent authoritarianism, did he? But he appears to be the current custodian of it. Yeah. And the Republicans and people that voted for him, they think that we are saying that he's an authoritarian as a criticism. Mm-hmm. But it's not a criticism. It's an observation. Yeah. And we want the whole country to prosper under a democratic leadership that is not necessarily a Democrat, but somebody who believes in democracy. And that, I guess, is the difference. Listen, we have to take a quick break, but I want to come back and do more, including ask you about the drones, because, if you're in Jersey, you must have some intel. Everyone needs to know. Yeah. So important. So important. We'll do that and a whole lot more next here on The Weekend Show. Did you know that 4 companies control over 80% of the US meat industry, and China now controls the largest portion of US pork? These companies are using mobster-like tactics to crush American family farms, and with the additives they're putting into our food, Americans are stuck with sketchy meat. So what can we do about this? Let me tell you about a company that's coming up swinging on behalf of American family farms and your family's food security. Moink. Their business is simple. Moink's meat comes from animals raised outdoors where a pig is free to be a pig. Their farmers are given an honest day's pay for an honest day's work, and they deliver meat straight to your doorstep at prices you can actually afford. Born, raised and harvested right here in the United States. Support American family farms and join the Moink movement today at moinkbox.com/weekend right now and get free wings for life. The best wings you'll ever taste for free, but for a limited time. Spelt MOINK box.com/weekend. That's moinkbox.com/weekend. We're back on the weekend show. And thank you for joining us. So much to discuss, and I'm thrilled that we're joined by Joe Carducci today, Jojo from Jers. We'll come to the drones in just a little while. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm just, I'm just interested in an eyewitness report.
Yeah, sure.
But let's look at where we're at the moment with, there's a situation going down as we're recording this with a continuing resolution that has basically been trounced by Trump and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, and they basically, what they want is to have the government shut down over the Christmas and holiday period because Joe Biden is still the president, and that makes it look like Joe Biden is as dysfunctional as they claim. I mean, that is so backward and clearly so offensive to anybody who is a patriot that I fear that we're going to see a lot of this. I think the government shut down 4 times when Trump was president last time. What do you make of these tactics?
Well, the government shut down for the longest it's ever been shut down under Donald Trump. And if you remember why it shut down, it was because he couldn't get Mexico to pay for the wall. They chanted, who's going to pay for it? Mexico. Who's going to pay for it? Mexico. And so he went to Congress and he said, well, you have to pay for my wall. And Congress said, hell, we do. We're not paying for your vanity wall. You can't make us pay for your wall. And he said, well, then I'm gonna shut the government down until you pay for my wall. Give me the funds to pay for my wall. And eventually, what happened? He took the funds from our military, which is ironic. Again, speaking of through lines, because shutdowns hurt our military most of all. Million plus, active duty troops don't get paychecks at Christmas. By the way, Merry Christmas. Yeah. So what is ironic, again, about this is that this is not America first. This is not patriotic. This is not the every man's warrior or champion going to battle for them. This is the antithesis of all that. Just 3 billionaires with unlimited, unchecked power, one of which was not even born here, by the way, that are pulling the purse strings for the United States government in ways that will not harm them at all. To the contrary, benefit them. One of the things they're trying to do is raise the debt ceiling. Why? So that they can add more debt to our bottom line to accommodate the richest of the rich and the tax cuts that they would like to give them even deeper than the ones they have. And that, as an aside, Donald Trump has already, we forget this all the time because we do, he has the dubious distinction of adding the 3rd largest amount of debt to our national, again, I think about it as like turkey around the midsection at Thanksgiving. He added almost $8 trillion worth of that debt that will saddle your children, your children's children with debt, almost, I think, the equivalent of $28,000 in debt per person, I think, in total. And now he has that dubious distinction already, but he was so strong on the economy. How could we forget? He also left office with less jobs than he came into office with. But, he was so strong on the economy. The whole thing is now there's 3 billionaires deciding that who can feel this, but of course it's the military and then the paycheck to paycheck folks who don't have $1 bazillion to sit on at Christmas when they're trying to figure out, okay, well, I've got the presents and now I've got them on my credit cards and okay, they're not actually paid for, but I now have to get the dinner. I have to make sure that I have the oil to heat the house. And 3 billionaires are saying, you know what? It's a good time for you to feel uncomfortable because what are you going to do? You can't have an emergency vote and be like, wait a minute, hold on. We didn't know what we were signing up for. This isn't what we want. You can't. They know that the levers of power are such, that their influence is such, that the repercussions for what they choose is such, that the only people who will be paying for what happens right now are the Congress people in 2 years and the senators in 2 years who have to go back up for re-election, maybe being primaried by Donald Trump, who said, you weren't with me when I wanted to shut the government down unless you gave me my, debt ceiling so I could make my friends richer. And Mike Johnson's getting destroyed too for the same reasons. He made deals. God forbid we do that. He made deals with the Democrats to fund our government so the Americans didn't hurt over Christmas. But here we are. It's the lion. It's what is that? The leopards eating the people's faces party, right? I didn't know that the leopards were going to eat my face. I thought they were going to eat the other people's. Weren't they supposed to round up all the immigrants that are eating my cats and dogs? And then Trump, all of this, well, he said last week, I forget what day, maybe this week. Oh yeah. It's going to be too hard to lower prices. Prices are, they're high. It's really, that's too hard. But we can make Canada our 51st state. Sure, that's something I can do, which is all nonsense. But he's telling them, I'm not going to lower prices. I was never going to do that. What I'm going to do, what I've always planned on doing, what all of you didn't realize, even though everybody else like Anthony and Joe were telling me otherwise, is I'm going to make my rich friends richer. And you're going to feel it. That's what's going to happen. And they're just saying it now. They're just putting it out there, like regurgitating it all over all of us at Christmas. And the American people are, oh, what do I do now? And there's nothing they can do. You could tell them to call their congressman. It's really not going to do anything. So, two billionaires in particular are pulling the purse strings of the United States government to the detriment of a lot of people who voted for them under the auspices of the price of eggs.
Groceries, which is a word that Donald Trump invented, as we now know. Who even says groceries? What does it even mean?
But you have to bring your ID to buy groceries. And make sure you wear your dungarees. He didn't say dungarees, but it's akin to the same thing.
Overalls, I think you guys call them, don't you?
Well, we have called them dungarees once upon a time.
Well, I'm down for the dungarees anytime.
Oh, is that a British thing too? Do you say
dungarees?
For
sure, 100%, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, standard issue. You have to wear them through your 30s. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
You don't call them jeans?
No. Jeans stop at the waist.
No, I'm not talking about overalls. Okay, so dungarees.
You see, there you go.
Dungarees can be just
all
jeans.
The way up.
Okay, no, that is still an overall. Yes,
our two countries have nothing in common. Let's be clear. There's a few words, but not most of them.
So true.
So
holiday for one.
Let's go back to the price of eggs for a minute, because nobody mentioned that there was an avian flu that resulted in the culling of 50 million chickens. No one talked about that. I don't know why the Democrats didn't talk about that either. The combination with the pandemic, of course, which was erased from not just Donald Trump's campaign, but really the Democrats as well. They didn't talk about the effect of the pandemic on global pricing. They didn't talk enough, in my opinion, about how inflation was a global issue.
Yeah.
Supply chain and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw the Pod Save America, where the Harris advisors were talking on deconstructing the campaign and how they went about it. And, we all were like thinking, oh, they've got this. And then when I hear them deconstructing their own plan, I was like, oh, maybe they didn't have it, which is very, very frustrating. But anyway, I'm not here to rubbish anybody. I'm here to say that why is it that some Americans believe that prices should be fixed? Because, that is like controlled capitalism. Eggs are volatile. Food is volatile. Gas is volatile. Computers and chips are volatile. This is a global economy and world markets. And, even the price of flights is volatile, if you haven't noticed. Mm-hmm. So, some people sit there at like 4 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday just because the price might drop a little bit to make their booking. And yet, when it comes to Trump and his rhetoric about pricing during the campaign and saying, we're going to fix that, we're going to deal with that, we're going to fix that, what he's actually describing is controlled capitalism, which is not something that any Republican would ever want. So there was this huge contradiction in all of the messaging, which just goes back to the point that I was making, that really it was never about the price of eggs. Mm-mm. It was just about that guy.
Yeah.
We want that guy.
No, price of eggs was a Trojan horse, right? So many of those things. Again, the border, in many ways, also Trojan horse. They're eating the dogs and the cats. fentanyl. Yes, fentanyl is a crisis. Yes, it's terrible. Yes, drugs are terrible. But if they're going to identify fentanyl and the border as terrible, there are mechanisms in place when they had the helm, as they will again, in the House of Representatives to do something about fentanyl, because you can actually, believe it or not, one of the ways you can do that is through gun control. Because the gangs in Mexico, because you can't get a gun in Mexico very easily, organically in Mexico, so the gangs in Mexico are using guns they got through here, right?
Right. This is what Claudia Scheinbaum was
but
saying.
They won't,
she was like,
you can't.
They're not our guns.
Right. But you can't have that conversation with Republicans when it comes to, doing anything to stem the fentanyl crisis, because they won't, don't touch my guns, come and take it. It's like, no, well, okay, yeah. But you said you want to do something about fentanyl, et cetera, et cetera. I forgot what the original question was. Now I've lost my way there, getting down the rabbit hole.
Well, it's about groceries being the Trojan horse.
A Trojan horse, right?
Yeah.
And yes, it's very convenient for a lot of people to, they have to do this a lot for themselves, I would say psychologically, is to sort of blame something else that seems rational or reasonable that you really do think is annoying. Yes. And sometimes it's, I can't buy eggs. Look, I personally, in 2021, my friends had to donate groceries secretly to my house by putting them in my car so that I could bring them inside and tell the kids I'd gone grocery shopping because I couldn't afford groceries. I understood what it meant to go to the grocery store and look at a jar of tomato sauce that was $1.79 and think, well, I'm going to have to wait on that because I can't afford that today. And it's horrible. It's horrible to look at prices of things that you would love to have and you need to have to feed your children. That I get. I totally get that. But a lot of people use that as an escape sort of hatch for accommodating their darker incentives, which is, this is a person who says the things I secretly think, that I can be aggrieved and it can be somebody else's fault. That's a big part of it too. It's not my fault that I have a low paying job, or that I have a small house, or that my car is breaking down, or that, I can't take fancy vacations. None of that's my fault. It's because someone else is coming for my insert variable. They're coming for my job. They're coming for my culture. They're coming for my kids. They're coming, you name it. That being aggrieved and having somebody else to blame is important there too. And the price of eggs was just a convenient sort of accommodation for a lot of people. And yeah, a lot of people are feeling it as well. But he never told them he was going to bring the price of eggs down. He never gave them a plan or concepts of a plan. Republicans never did it either. They never provided them with any of that. And so if they didn't, when Kamala was very clear in her plans, all Democrats were very clear in their plans and outlining them, that is how you absolutely know it's not about policy. Something else is at play. And yes, it is Donald Trump, but it is the larger concept of what he's selling and has been selling. That
You're seeking someone to blame, because if you find someone to blame, you don't have to do the work yourself.
Right. And we're inherently lazy as human beings, right? That's just true. Like, who's going to work harder when you're going to tell me that I can just have something for free? Yeah. And so I think that is, unfortunately, a lot of what is going on here related to the price of eggs, et cetera. But there's this other part there that is important too, because this does, and I don't often focus on the autopsy of what went wrong and who did what wrong where. I just don't. I think that there are lessons to learn that I would prefer to sort of look at them from a 30,000 view and then 30,000 foot view and then say, okay, I want to do this differently. That's my focus. It's not as I'm just focusing on what was wrong, but like, well, okay, what can we do differently? What happened was Americans who were feeling like, I don't feel this great economy you guys keep telling us about, even though it was the best COVID recovery of all of our peer nations by and large. I don't feel it, but you keep telling me that it's real. You keep telling me that you are going to, you understand what I need. You understand what I'm feeling, but I need you to listen to me. Like, I need you to hear me and ask me, what do you need? I don't want you to tell me what I need. I don't want you to tell me what I feel. I want you to hear me and I want you to acknowledge that's real, because it never got through. Those messages never got through. I mean, again, all of the seeds of incredible policy that Joe Biden and the Democrats were able to plant in the first 2 years of his administration, when we had the trifecta, the fruits of those seeds will blossom, of course, during Donald Trump's term. We'll have bridges and infrastructure and roadways.
He'll take full credit for everything.
1,000%.
He'll be like, see, I told you I'd bring inflation down.
Exactly. I
Right.
told you I would build this bridge in your town. In fact, we should name it after me. And then the Republicans will be like, of course we should name it after you.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Biden's like, we can't name that after me. Like, that's a whole thing. There's a state level and a thing level and a blah, blah, blah. And Trump will be like, I want my name on this bridge, just like the stimulus check. And that's our responsibility. That stuff is incumbent upon us to push back against. We have to be the truth tellers, and we have to hold those lies. We have to hold them to account. We have to keep our receipts right now. But I think, again, sorry, last thing is, we learned a lot of lessons from what people were actually feeling, where they were feeling seen most, where their truth seemed to be resonating most. And it really wasn't a talk at me strategy. It really wasn't, I want to see my candidate on a stage with famous people. It wasn't any of that, because they just disengaged with it. It was, come where I consume information. Come talk to the people I like, the people I trust, the people who talk like I talk. Come to talk to Brett. Come talk to people like Joe, which I've been pounding my desk for the better part of the last year, saying, you guys, yeah, I get it. You talk to a lot of white guys. You do. Like, no offense. I love a lot of white guys, but like, they looked a lot like the same white guys. And I'm a white lady, but I'm also a single mom in the suburbs who understands that the child tax credit was this lifeline that saved my family for a good while. But also, I talk like the people talk. And there's a lot of us out there who do that. And they're finally understanding the value of that now. So we have to lean into that more. But unfortunately, we have also to fight against what is going to be a tsunami of the worst behavior human beings are capable of exhibiting, because they've been told now that it's not only okay, that we're going to reward you with the highest office in the world, despite some of the worst behavior that a person could commit. And that, sorry, last thing I'll say, that explains why people like me have seen an increase in death threats, an increase in doxing, and an increase in intentional, spreading of my personal information, encouragement of doing that. You would have thought a party that won might back off a little bit and be like, okay, well, we can go enjoy the...
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, is that despite winning, they still are chomping at the bit to take down Democrats and own the libs and put out all of this propaganda. And I want to ask you very quickly, Trump suing the media, because, this is the next chapter that we're going to see, which we didn't quite see last time. And he referred to the media are starting to fall in line when he was screwing up the stock exchange. But now he has filed a lawsuit against the Des Moines Register, the newspaper, and Seltzer, accusing them of consumer fraud and election interference over the poll that came just before the election that showed that Harris was leading Trump in Iowa. Now, he won Iowa, right? So let's see what the problem is. But it's this level of retribution and going after a free press, which he calls the enemy of the people and has been calling for nearly a decade. And no one seemed to take that seriously enough. And now we're going to see the effect of that.
Right. Well,
because arguably he won the election because of disinformation.
Yes.
Right. And he'd infiltrated much of the media. Now he's going to seek to sue anybody that doesn't report on him favorably.
I mean, again, let's take out that book, right? Take out that's like authoritarian playbook page.
Yeah, page one.
And I'm not giving him particular credit for being a strict adherent to any philosophy of any kind, but these things work for a reason. It's not like, nothing fell out of a coconut tree. You know what I mean? This is stuff that just works. And one of the things that you have to do is dismantle the free media, right? So that you can really seize power, because then you can control messaging, you can control the truth. You can control information, and information is power. Information is what any authoritarian doesn't want you to have, because if you have access to information, then you have access to free thought, you're capable of that, then you can challenge them and their authority, and then we realize, well, hold on, they're not actually making anything better. Guys, did we not notice that there's no more public school and that our 12-year-old is working in the field and that dad just got emphysema at the factory job where there's no protections? No, you can't have any of that, right? Because to an authoritarian, then those are the keys to their undoing. I forgot now where I was going with that, but what was the original question? Because I just started thinking
it's about the suing of
so ABC.
Yeah.
So, sorry. Yeah. The page from the playbook that this one is number one rule on tyranny. Do not obey in advance. This is it. We've been seeing this for a while. We saw it already with the LA Times and I believe the Washington Post, who would not endorse. They would not endorse a candidate, even though they knew. I mean, come on, stop it. Like, they've been endorsing candidates forever. Yeah. You can't take a stand. You can't tell me that you can look at an adjudicated rapist. I can say that, by the way. An adjudicated rapist, convicted felon, many times over indictee business fraud, and say that these things are versus a prosecutor, senator, vice president. You can't put those two things up side by side. But one of them incited an insurrection the last time. One of them never did. And you can't say I pick one. That was obeying in advance. That's the kind of thing we can't have, because that's what authoritarians need when these huge institutions and pillars of democracy just take the knee in advance. Christopher Wray, again, you can argue all day long. Oh, he did it for a strategic reason, blah, blah, blah. No. The director of the FBI serves a 10-year term. He needed to stay and fight. He needed to stay and fight and force them to say, no, we are not going to follow these rules. This is a political office, and we're going to do what he already did with James Comey. We're going to do it again. That should be a big red alarm. And the biggest of all, in terms of the press, is ABC, Disney, that don't say gay litigants who went after DeSantis, rightfully so. They settled after George Stephanopoulos sloppily handled whether or not Trump is. He said he was liable of rape, that the jury found him liable of rape, that yet he stumbled through that. He was harping on it. Did it reach the level of what they were being, accused of? I don't think so. I'm not a lawyer, but I talked to George Conway the other day. We had lunch. She's like, no, it absolutely did not. So why ABC settling what did it say to Donald Trump, who is an adjudicated rapist, by the way? Oh, you can't say anything about him, whether it's true or not. It
sets a precedent, even in law, to a certain extent,
right?
Because case law is very much forms future opinions. And if ABC are settling, $15 million apparently was George's annual salary.
I didn't know that.
Way too much for a news anchor, I have to say. That shocked me. I was like,
we
really?
have a problem there too.
There's part
Lots
of your
of problems there. Yeah.
And so I'm very much of the opinion that this could have a domino effect. Sure. And if people are not going to stand up to him, because he's a coward, right? Mm-hmm. He threatens. Yeah. But he never actually does. He often loses in court or settles before the case even comes to court. But in this instance, what else was going on? I mean, there is talk that ABC Disney had government contracts that they feared they might lose, that there was more at play than just this incident.
And I know that was probably true of Joe and Mika when they went down to Mar-a-Lago and kissed the ring. And that one particularly offended me because I was a very loyal listener. I listened on the radio and I didn't watch the show in the mornings. I would just listen in the car. I was a very loyal listener of that show, and watching or hearing about them doing that shook me to my core. But ABC, they said the same thing. People said, oh, well, there were threats against actions against their show, actions the channel, and ABC was probably making a lot of those same calculations. But let's just talk about how effed up that is, please. Yeah. Because no, that's not normal. You should not have to worry about retribution from the President of the United States because you had the audacity as journalists to report the news, the real news, the actual facts, as long as they still existed, because, I mean, we've all read 1984, right? Like, what happens is that they control the past, they control the future. I mean, the whole ball game here is telling people January 6th, they didn't see what they saw and they didn't hear what they heard, and there's no such thing as truth. The truth and untruth, right? As long as you cling to the truth, that you're not mad. And that's where we are. But so it's not normal. I dropped my pen. It's not normal for any of this to be our reality. And what we need, to your point again, is for true advocates and adherents to free speech.
Yes. The
people who actually embody that idea to say, no, I am not going to bend over for you now. because this is the time when I need to stand up the most. And I need a whole bunch of people to have my back because we're more powerful together. And I'm watching my friends peel off. Like, what? But extraordinary times reveal the truth about a lot of people, their weaknesses and their strengths. And we are seeing legacy media yet again proving to the American people they are not worthy of your trust and respect. And for you to put all your eggs, no pun intended, they're very expensive. Don't put them in that one basket. Don't put them in that basket a lot.
Media ownership is part of the issue here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the owners of these media organizations, they also own a bunch of other businesses as well.
Yeah.
That are tied in with either government contracts or some kind of, at a level that makes them vulnerable.
Which is a problem.
Really, media ownership should be independent.
Yeah.
There should be no controlling forces, and then you can be truly, journalistic in your work. But it means that the likes of Joe and Mika and even ABC, they're not doing journalism. They're not really able to because there's too much at stake further up the chain.
Too many other people with their interests on the line, right? Too many other people who aren't beholden to the truth in any way, shape, or form, because that's not what it's about. It's about their bottom line. And the irony here, and I am no expert on this, my God, Lord knows, but I will just say this because I went to dinner at a restaurant in the city, in that whole little area where Fox is and all the like networks are, kind of over by Radio City Music Hall, but no, kind of by Rockefeller Center. That's it. Rockefeller Center, that area. Sort of a hub of like, all these news channels. And I was with a gentleman who's come up in, radio for a long time, an older guy who knows the history of that land, those pieces of land, right? And what he educated me on, because I didn't really know, and though I've learned about it but forgot, is that ABC, CBS, and NBC exist because they knew they needed to break up these big entities, that if they just had one large conglomerate, they would have too much power, too much influence, and they would be too easily used by bad actors as a weapon or as a means of propagandizing or controlling or, one isolated message. If you're given that kind of a megaphone and then you have a person who, God forbid, would like to exploit that, which of course we do, that is too much. It's a recipe for disaster. So they split them up into these smaller, I think it was ABC and NBC first. I may be wrong. No, it's CBS and NBC first. And again, I apologize to anybody out there who's like, well, she's kind of sort of right, but not really. But yes, the whole, I think, goal was to make sure that we didn't have too much concentrated emphasis in any one specific destination. And here we are, right? Those very companies, those very networks, bending the knee because they're afraid of, the person who would like to exploit them or the person who would like to punish them. And or the person who can. And that separation that was supposed to exist between those networks and power, it's no longer the case because so many different hands have gotten involved here in government contracts and, oh no, I might lose this. And it's not the news anymore.
There's also historical friendships, Joe and Mika were very close with Donald Trump previously.
Well, that too, yeah.
And so it's so incestuous. Mm-hmm. And I think that is another reason for people to distrust the mainstream and corporate media, which, I would be much happier if they just straightened out their act and they just kind of started over and recognized that actually there is a use for them because a functioning democracy needs a free press. Mm-hmm. But it seems to be left to people like us and our colleagues in the independent sector to really kind of, this goes back to the very beginning of our conversation, but to pick up the pieces because we do not have entanglements. And that's really what people need because it's the warfare is information warfare. I mean, in Hungary, Orban has basically taken over the media. He controls everything now. Mm-hmm. So there is no criticism. And, Trump's probably had a conversation with him and has been told, look, you need to get your media in order.
I mean, Putin as well. Xi, forget it. MBS literally hacked one of his critics to death. This is 1,000%. And Trump lays bare that he would like very much to be like those people in many ways. And he's such a narcissist and like so thin-skinned that any criticism of him is like daggers and, just cuts him up into pieces where he's like, he fixates on seeking revenge. And when handed the kind of immunity that the Supreme Court just handed him, it's terrifying to consider, but it is 1,000% to your point again, why I believe so many people have migrated to independent digital media, to independent sources of information, because they know that they're not beholden to some sort of big brother entity that is really pulling the strings and also rooting for the bad guy because the bad guy makes them more money in some way, right? So that's also this like elephant in the room that's been there throughout this whole election where you're like, you kind of know that like you're sort of like playing this weird two sides thing because you would like the horse race, and in the end, Donald Trump is so incendiary that people consume all this stuff and your bottom line improves. Which you've probably heard people say, "Oh, you're probably happy, Anthony. I mean, Donald Trump winning is probably the best thing that ever happened to you because now you're just guaranteed more content." And it's like,
it's completely the opposite,
right?
And this is what people don't understand. It's like this crusade. It's a public service, and we're in now, and we do it because we have to, not necessarily because we want to, but because we have to, because it's essential. Because Trump now has a trifecta of Musk and Bezos and Zuckerberg, and they have all in the last couple of weeks either donated huge sums or they've said, he's a pretty cool guy, as Zuckerberg did about him ducking during the shooting. The shooting, incidentally, I also feel contributed to his win. Mm-hmm. So, the whole thing is, it's like the worst movie that we can't kind of walk out halfway through and ask for a refund, right? We have to sit through to the end. Yeah.
Yes, it absolutely feels like that. And there are moments where I'll just be doing something completely benign, like washing dishes, and I'll go, oh, really? Really? This really happened? Really? And a lot of people still, I mean, we know post-election, a lot of people, stopped watching news, listening to news, myself included. That's fine. I think you manage however you need to manage. A lot of people just aren't coming back right now at all to any of this. Exhaustion, fatigue, not wanting to deal with reality. Well,
it's a depression. I describe it as. That people are depressed.
Yeah.
And all of us have seen our viewership drop significantly.
Yes. They don't want to engage with any of it. I get it. It's like, I can't see you. I can't see you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Like, I get it. We have to do whatever we can to survive. And what's happening as well, in conjunction with that, which is not helping, is that some of the trusted voices, some of the trusted fighters, some of the trusted like champions that we've come to expect to be there, you're like, where did you go? Like what?
Right.
Like Michelle? Barack, are you out there? Like, where did you go? And it feels like people were just like, oh, well, we're fine. See ya. And we need people like you, people like Ron, people like the Meiselas brothers, people like me, people like Lee, people like all of these incredible YouTube creators and TikTok for as long as it exists, which I believe it will continue to. We need people like that to come together, to work together, to find coalitions, to lift each other up, to amplify each other, to look out for each other, and to continue to hold truth to power and to hold these bad actors to account. Because what else are we going to do? But also we understand now, and the powers that be understand now, that people are looking to us to do that. And what you have to find, and when you find someone who is still beholden to the truth, because there are lots of people who are independent digital creators out there who are not. But when you find people, again, like Midas Touch, like the network, like you guys, like you and Ron, like I 1000% will say that is true of me. When you find people like that, you stick with them, and then they should stick with each other and hold each other up to that standard as well. But that's why I think moving ahead into whatever comes next, as bleak and dark as it will be, we're on the front lines. Like, we're on the front lines of making sure that the American people don't get so dispirited that they just succumb to the worst reality that we've seen throughout history, getting back to something we talked about again early, the Holocaust, etc. I know that sounds hyperbolic. History does not repeat, but it certainly does rhyme. And we are looking at the building blocks of that which rhymes very closely to that. But the bulwark against it is going to be the American people. We are still a democracy, right? At the end of the day, you can say, oh, no, Democratic Republic. I don't care. Whatever, representative republic. I don't care what you want to call it. It's still about we the people. And when we the people feel disheartened to the point where they are just gone, it's hard to get them back. But having fighters, advocates, warriors, truth tellers, up there fighting the good fight, telling the truth as much as possible, I believe that that is the way through, and we have to walk through it to get out of it. So that's my little spiel about that.
It's essential, and I'm pleased you did. I feel a bit embarrassed to ask about the drones now because it seems so trivial.
Well, let me tell you something funny about the drones. No, it's not trivial. It is trivial, but it's also like, what the fuck? I don't know if I can say that. But so the drones, it's weird because sidebar, drones related. I was leaving my local, I call it the wine shop because I'm very classy, liquor store. And I hear, hey, what about those drones, huh? As I'm walking out, I didn't think the person was talking to me because there was no, hey, it was, hey, what about the drones, huh? And I didn't answer. And then he said, what about the drones? And I turned around and I said, what? Are you talking to me? And he said, yeah, aren't you that lady who's always on social media, running her mouth all the time? Don't you know everything? And I was like, oh God. I go, maybe. And then he goes, well, what's the deal with the drones? And I said, I don't know. You think I have the answer to that? I'm like, dude, I haven't even figured out the settings on my dishwasher. I've had it since 2007. I don't know what's up with the drones. I have no idea. That's all I said. But my kids have their own theories. They say that they've seen them. My senator, my newest senator, Andy Kim, who I love, has, he's doing a lot of work trying to get to the bottom of this. Of course, you had the former governor of Maryland identifying constellations as drones. Not a great look, but it is something. You know who doesn't talk about it? People here. My kids do. My kids talk to their kids. None of us talk about the drones. It's still like, whatever. I haven't seen them. It's this big giant story that everyone has their own thoughts on. But here, living in New Jersey, at least where I'm at, it's like we talk about pizza and when you guys want to get drinks. And, did you see this Instagram reel? It's hysterical. This lady falls down. Like, that's what we talk about. I mean,
but it is interesting that the media and the conversation seems to have spent more time on drones than on the election. Mm-hmm. And I would have preferred the energy that went into drones to really have kind of dissected what was coming with the way the vote turned out, because maybe the drones are a convenient distraction so people don't have to think about it. Oh
yeah, that's exactly right. I think it very well could be, and I think that there's some strategy here to understanding that the American people, by and large, don't want to engage with. They certainly don't want to engage with what is to come. But you give them something to be intrigued about, something to fear. Right? It's that fear too, and then they feel like that's where they can put their attention because it's an easy off ramp from the doom and gloom of what might befall us as a reality. When you look around your town and you think, how many of my kids' friends, are going to get deported? When you look around town and you realize I have friends with, cancer or diabetes or you name the underlying pre-existing condition who might not have access to health care soon. I mean, these are things that people don't want to think about it. And I understand that, right? Like, who wants to focus all their time and energy on, especially at Christmas? So yeah, the drones are a convenient distraction. The Republicans are particularly good at distractions, so that I wouldn't say that they're driven by them, but you just look at Nancy Mace and her ridiculous bathroom nonsense. But distractions help a lot of people on many levels. They help people cope. They also help keep the attention off of the really bad things that are about to happen. And so it's kind of important that, again, people like you, people like Ron, people like me, people like the Maya Salas brothers, we have to talk about the things, but not in a way that makes people feel like they are hopeless. There's a way to navigate that. There's a way to thread that needle, and we have to find it so that people feel empowered, and that's important. Empowered and not hopeless. Like, it's hard to find hope in this darkness, but what did the Kamala say in her in a closing speech, like when it's darkest, you can see the stars shine the brightest. You can see the stars the best. And we have to remember that. I mean, I keep coming back to that. I keep coming back to it because what choice do we have? What are we gonna? Yeah, the drones. It's funny. It is a distraction, and maybe it's hopefully not the Iranians or it's not aliens or.
Well, why they chose New Jersey and just
why
wanted
wouldn't
to
they?
Not
I mean, why wouldn't they? What are you saying?
Head to
By
Miami.
the way,
I don't know.
Well, did you know War of the Worlds was supposed to have taken place in New Jersey?
There we are.
So
That's
the aliens,
what it is.
they get it. Like, everybody knows that this is the place to be. Even the whomever nefarious actors are behind the drones. But they also know that in New Jersey, we have conversations like this, Anthony, where we talk about getting through the darkness and doing it together, because that is going to be a crucial component. And I have a whole lot of ideas that I'm working on that are going to combine a lot of these elements, but I want to find a way to bring people together so that they can be distracted by something that is not only productive, but fun. And I'm working on stuff. Look out for that, because I have big ideas and they're coming really soon, like right after Christmas soon.
That's great. Well, me too. I feel that too. I feel a great sense of calling, and there's definitely going to be some interesting times ahead, and I think we're all up for the challenge. But we have to finish now. But for now, Jo Carducci, thank you for joining The Weekend Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5 Minute News. You can see more from me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast. And I'll come back next Sunday with a brand new special guest and more factual news to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.